Stock South here. I just thought I'd put out a missing persons bulletin. Actually, not really a person, although we always kind of thought of Squirreley as one of the family. Pain in the neck though he was sometimes. Squirreley, yeah, was a squirrel that used to, I'd say for about 4 or 5 years, used to hang out on this particular tree. You see it? I think this is a birch, forgive me, but I think it is. And Squirreley kind of called that home. He often would, you see this one limb, let me see. Yeah, follow my finger, okay. He'd run up and down this one. You'd think this was Main Street, USA for him. He'd run on down. You can see where the limb kind of goes around, okay. He'd get over to here, be hanging on, and then he'd take a flying leap and he'd get over on this sumac tree. Don't ask me how, but he would. He'd catch it. Momentum or gravity would pull him down to about 3 foot below the leaf line, and he'd hang on, and then he'd climb up to the top, jump over to this tree, then down and over. He'd be up on this one. It'd be an up and down battle, and then the little stinker would jump down into this area, where of course in winter or the fall or early spring, we'd be feeding the birds all sorts of things like crushed up matzahs, cereal we got on sale real cheap, and that kind of thing. And he'd fill his face, and usually a couple of his pals would come over, do the same thing. And them and the birds, they and the birds got along just fine. No one really hurt one another. But Squirreley would, then of course, once he have his fill, up, over, down, around, jump, a leap over to there, back up onto this limb, up and over, and then he'd climb up the tree and go right around there. Okay, down this branch. See it? Yeah, this branch here, and he'd pounce on the on this assembly, the lattice work, and he'd run over here. He'd run over here, and he'd figure out a way to get into the eave, under the house, under the roof. And then, of course, you'd hear him scurrying up here. I don't think he actually spent too much time in the house, but he'd go in there to get warm. Then next thing you know, you'd see the little bugger out there again. I'd do what I could to stop him, put up little whatever I could find, and he'd go, but he'd chew through it. Often you'd see him out walking the clothesline, over to that tree and then up. But all of a sudden, one day Sandy said to me, she said, "Hey, where the heck's Squirreley?" And I said, now that you mention it, I haven't seen him in a while. Maybe he's, I don't know, maybe he's probably the right age to have a mate. Maybe they went off to a better neighborhood to raise their kids. I don't know. Used to be, he kept, if you look way up in the tree, I don't know if you can see it, but he used to have like a squirrel nest up there, and he'd spend the colder days of winter all huddled up in there. But I don't know, maybe he found himself a girl. The one thing we are a little worried about is, he's, he must be 5 or 6 years old. Maybe that's the lifespan for a squirrel. Or worse would be that, I know sometimes you'll be sitting around here, like for instance, can you see that picnic table down there? Okay, yeah, down near the river. Well, I know one day I was watching a chipmunk just kind of sitting on the table, and man, out of nowhere come this eagle. And I mean, these eagles just all of a sudden, one minute they're there and the next second they aren't. And they got you, and boy, that poor chipmunk didn't stand a chance. Old eagle just snapped his neck and flew off, probably to one of those trees across the river. It was amazing. Now, I'm hoping that didn't happen to Squirreley, but I don't know. I know the dogs across the way, they just like barking at him. They wouldn't hurt him. You may have heard the dogs barking earlier. So I don't know. Now, maybe get a chance, just maybe say a prayer for poor old Squirreley. I certainly hope he's around and we see him this winter. Again, the birds are going to miss him. Oh well. Anyway, I'll see you later, friends. Thank you, and God bless. Keep your eyes open for if you're in the Port Murray area. Just maybe make sure Squirreley, if you see him, just tell him he ought to get back home. We'll see you later. Bye now.